Most of the materials that I'm going to share with you today is taken from a course that I developed together with our journal editors in Elsevier Researcher Academy. And I'm also going to share with you a lot of anonymized peer review reports throughout the slides. So let me just go through them. I will start with a brief introduction about what do we mean by peer review, then asking everyone to share some kind of background with me about their experience with peer review in terms of author and reviewer. And I know some editors are also in the room. I'll also share with you attitudes towards peer review, results of a survey that we ran in collaboration with Sense About Science in 2019. I'll share with you also kind of an update about different peer review models, the terminology, and the way that they can be of more help for the community. Then I'll take you through the peer review process and give you some tips and tricks around how to write a good peer review report. And I will basically finish by inviting you all to join us. First, what is peer review? Well, it is the process of validation of an academic work by experts. And the purpose is to improve the quality of the research, to ensure that the previous work is properly acknowledged, to improve the quality of the published paper, ensure previous work is acknowledged, as I said, determine the importance of findings, assess the originality and significance of the work for most journals, and also highlighting the omissions of reference lists, or also highlighting any ethical concerns. It includes both internal staff, like journal editorial offices and journal editors, and external researchers in the role of peer reviewers, and it cannot be completed without having both in place. Let me just now pause and ask you about your peer review experience. Mary, can you set up the first poll, please? So I'd like to know how many peer review reports have you received for your manuscripts submitting to different journals in the past 2 years? You can choose between 0, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, or more than 11. Great. So apparently the majority of people have had experiences in the past 2 years with the peer review process, and probably some of you had not a very nice experience with the peer review process. Let me ask you, how many review reports yourselves did you submit in the past 2 years to journals reaching out to you, inviting you to review a manuscript? Could we have the second poll, please, Mary? Again, the options are 0, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, or more than 11. Okay, so apparently the majority has reviewed more or less the same amount of the manuscripts that they have submitted. Great. Let me just quickly tell you a little bit about what the community thinks about peer review. This is a summary of a survey. The link is in the slides, and after the webinar, I will share it with you so you can go through it on your own pace. But it was a survey that followed up from an original one ran in 2009, understanding the level of trust in the community on peer review. And then after 10 years, in 2019, it was revised and then resent again. There were, if I managed to get through the slides, there were more than 3,000 responses from different disciplines, different career levels across the globe. And one of the things that was quite clear was that peer review widely is believed to improve the quality of research and keep scientific communication under control. And only 38% believe that it is well understood by the public. And I think the pandemic showed it quite clearly to all of us that the kind of understanding the research community has about peer review is not shared with the public, and there is some work to be done in that regards. Another thing I want to share with you is basically what we talked about. So more than the majority, 87% of the respondents believe the evaluation of research by two relevant researchers, either with or without input from a member of the editorial team, qualifies as peer review. And this is important. It happens a lot internally in Elsevier with my colleagues that when some journal editors ask, like, well, we are mostly reviewing the manuscripts internally, can we call this peer review? I tend to say no, peer review really needs to have that external angle in place as well. And then something, again, we know from the survey and is very relevant to today's workshop is the fact that the majority thinks that clear guidance and guidelines for reviewers helps also the value and the quality of the peer review process. Right, peer review models. I think everyone knows about single and double blind. These are rather standard ways of doing peer review, but when it comes to open peer review, there comes loads of questions because different journals and different communities have different understandings of the peer review process. When it is open, for example, some believe that open peer review means publication of the names of reviewers. Some believe it is about the content, and there is no common understanding about it. To address this, in January 2020, STM organization, which has members from publishers and scholarly communication organizations, put people together to create a STM taxonomy working group, where the team looked into different definitions and tried to understand try to create a kind of consistency for the terminology, and also help create a kind of workflow to integrate these definitions and terminologies into the publication process. And some of you were also present in the work in the webinar we organized. I think it was in July last year, where we introduced the STM taxonomy, and it is now publicly available and is being piloted by participating publishers in the first phase, which is basically allowing the journal community to understand the taxonomy. It has 4 categories: identity transparency, that can be all identities visible, single anonymized, double anonymized, triple anonymized. And we moved away from blind. The terminology is a bit obliged, and we thought, well, if we are going to make this as a standard, let's use a kind of an inclusive language. The second category is about reviewer interacts with, and this is where the open peer review is given more precise definition. So reviewers can interact directly with editors through submission systems or emails, or with other reviewers of the same manuscript, or in some cases directly with authors. Then the third category is about review information published, and this is again to make the open peer review more transparent and understandable. In the standard ways, nothing about the review information is published. But there are journals now publishing review summary, review reports with author opt-in, reviewer opt-in, and all sorts of variations. And then the last thing, which is also new in the publishing industry, is post-publication peer review that can happen through invitations or in being available for the public. Now, since the beginning of this year, we are now piloting it at the journal level, where the guide for authors and the journal homepage and reviewer invitation letters are properly reflecting the taxonomy in the communications. And then hopefully next year we are going to start piloting it at the article level. And by we, I mean Elsevier and all the other publishers who were included in this taxonomy working group. This is a screenshot of one of Elsevier journals that is now clearly showing what the journal peer review process looks like. Now here you can see the identity transparency is single anonymized, review interacts only with editor, and the review information published include review reports when the reviewers opt in, as well as author-editor communications, and there is also editor's name, editor identity available on the article page. The differences between different review models is also important in the peer review process. When it is single anonymized, reviewers know who the authors are, but authors are not aware of the identity of reviewers. And the reason of using such a model, specifically very common in physical sciences and health and medicine, is that reviewers are believed to be able to criticize the work without any sense of retaliation by authors. But the disadvantage is that the process leaves reviewers with lots of rooms for all kinds of biases that can play a role in the process, because knowing author's name can help, if you want, reviewers to also guess their country, and their affiliation is also available, and that opens the door for all kinds of biases. To address the bias, some communities started with double anonymized peer review, where the reviewer doesn't know who the author is, as well as the author who doesn't know the reviewer's identity. But there are some technical kind of disadvantages here, because in niche topics, even writing styles can reveal the identity of people. And then in practice, it is really difficult to anonymize manuscripts, because people usually self-cite their previous works or refer to their department group in their manuscripts. So there needs a lot of attention to be put in that. There is also triple anonymized, where neither authors nor reviewers are aware of their identity, each other's identity, but also the decision-making editor only looks into the content of manuscript and review reports and doesn't know who the reviewer and the author are. But again, it is extremely difficult to properly anonymize review reports when they are clearly asking, for example, for self-citation. And the same holds for the clear to truly anonymize authors' manuscripts. Knowing that you all have had experiences with the peer review process, I'm not going through the process. Let me just directly go and start from the point where the editor starts to select reviewers. The best practice is usually having two independent reviewers providing comments to authors. Many editors have a database of experts in the field that they use and reach out. And they usually try to select a reviewer with an expertise that is matching the areas of expertise of authors and the subject of the manuscript. The reviewer is usually invited through the system, and after they accept, they are given some instructions about how to review the manuscript. And they are given some time frame and deadline so that it doesn't take forever to get the report out. But this is not always the case. Now, sometimes, well, reviewers agree to review, but they never turn out and don't even respond to reminders that the editor sent. In that case, the editor needs to go back into square number one and find a new expert in the field. Editors usually appreciate when you decline an invite to introduce someone you know who is an expert in the field, and that speeds up the process and helps editors to push the process even faster than what they expected. Sometimes editors receive review reports of no help. I will show you some of those kind of review reports, which means that after some time that has been taken to secure the review, and also the weeks that the reviewer took up to basically produce something of no help, editors need again to go back to square number one and find a different reviewer. So it is really a kind of a challenge for editors to get two helpful and constructive review reports. And even if the review reports are good, in most cases, they don't come back on time, and reviewers usually request extra time. And that means delaying the process, means authors being on their toes, waiting for a response, and that is very frustrating. I'm going to give you two examples. There are loads of them that you can find on a website that collects all the bad review reports. It's called Shit My Reviewer Said. Here are two examples. Just one sentence, good paper, but not very original. Another one says, interesting letter. The third sentence in the first paragraph needs at least another word phrase change to like to deal with some aspects, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't help, doesn't really give editor any direction to go with. So a good review report addresses content and explains whether it is accurate, touches about its depth, breadth, currency, appropriateness of the paper for journals readers, quality and clarity of author's writing, organization and flow of idea, adequacy of review of the literature, appropriateness of the method, use of correct statistics and data displayed in the tables and graphs, conclusions supported by the data, and recency of references. Once the review reports are back in the system, editors screen the tone of the review reports. And harsh and unprofessional reports usually take a lot of time from editor because they would not like to send them as they are to authors. Sometimes they have a hard time to edit or ignore bits and pieces. Here is another example. I'm afraid this manuscript may contribute not so much towards the field's advancement as much as towards its eventual demise. And of course, once the review reports are in and editors have taken the time to combine them with a proper decision, they inform authors with either of these decision terms, except with no revisions. That is really rare. Revise, which is either minor revision or major, and reject. Knowing all this, let's now switch gears and see how to peer review. It is usually, as I said, starts with an invitation. So imagine you just got an invitation. What's next? You need to first check about your availability. If you're heading to a conference, even an online version nowadays, you have deadlines because you're submitting a paper, a grant application. Check those out before just hitting accept. Make sure your expertise are the right ones that is matching the abstract that you've been shared with. Also, the declarations of interest. Not every conflict of interest is available to editors. They do their best to remove the candidates with a conflict of interest. But some of those in conflict of interest are not really something that editors can find. For example, you just sat in the author's PhD defense as a jury, for example. It's something that you'd better raise with the editor. And also the confidentiality of the manuscript. It is important to keep it confidential. Now, if you decide to accept, check for the general instructions available on the journal instructions and guide for reviewers, and also check the kind of requirements journals have for authors. That's what you need to check when you're reading the manuscript. And make sure that the journal's policy about confidentiality is something that you're familiar with. If you decide to decline, make sure you provide a reason. There is always in the submission systems a field that is asking you to provide a reason, and also asks you to suggest a suitable candidate. That will help editor in the process of securing the real number of reviewers for the manuscript. And again, keep the manuscript details that has been shared with you confidential. The general considerations is, well, you are now a reviewer, so please be professional and courteous. Be objective, constructive, and specific. Read the entire manuscript, including appendices, before starting to write your comments. Make sure you're familiar with the journal's guidelines. Be consistent with your confidential comment to editors. I'll talk to you about this later. And don't forget, the purpose is to improve the work that is presented. Make sure that you do not do these things. Do not write anything you would not be happy to receive as an author yourself. Do not copy edit the manuscript. Clearly, for that, there are copy editors. You're not being requested for your language experts. Do not ask authors to include any of your previous works unless it is absolutely necessary. This is not about you and your citations. It's about the authors. Do not request extra analysis and experiments unless it is absolutely necessary to support the claim that authors have made in their current manuscripts. It's not about your favorite way of doing things. It's about the reported manuscripts findings. Now, checklists and guidelines, several journals, particularly in health and medicine, request authors to follow some checklists and guidelines. Consort for randomized trials, Prisma for systematic reviews. These are the things that you need to make sure if are requested by the journal from authors, and then you look it up in the manuscript and the details. Also check the article type. If the article that you're being asked to review is a seminar and the journal clearly mentions it is not about novelty, then do not argue about its novelty. The overall structure of your review report is going to be the following. Best is to start with a paragraph that is summarizing your understanding of the main points of the paper. And then follow it up with the kind of items that you think would be the strengths and the weaknesses of the manuscript. Questions that you might want to consider in preparing for this paragraph would be, does the study add to current knowledge? Does it challenge existing paradigms? Does it actually matter? And here is an example. The current study is on a topic of relevance and general interest to the readers of the journal. I found the paper to be overall well-written and felt confident that the authors performed careful and thoughtful field and spectral processing. The design of the field campaign, combined with several micromet stations, makes the dataset seem quite useful. However, the description of some very important points are inadequate or completely missing. I have very little confidence in one important analysis. and came away with too many questions to be able to recommend this paper without major revision. Clearly, this example is taken from a confidential comment to editor, because later on I'll tell you, as a reviewer, when you're writing your comments to authors, avoid using any decision recommendation. Once you created that kind of, you set the scene with that first paragraph, then you can start your actual critique by starting with major comments. These are the fundamental items that need to be addressed before the paper is ready to be published. And then you can start with the most concerning issues and work down. Here is another example. I have several significant concerns about the presentation and general results that should be addressed prior to publication. First, calibration and validation of conductance models. Ideally, I think it would be best to use separate FluxNet forest sites for calibration and validation of the model. However, it would be acceptable to split the 5 sites into separate calibration and validation periods. I assume that is what the authors have done, but this is not explicitly stated. The calibration and validation should be done using different time periods that are explicitly stated. Instead of starting from the most pressing item and moving down to the least, you could also start your comments from section to section. So you're starting from title, summary, then introduction, methods, and so on and so forth. There again, you start numbering your comments with the major ones and then going to something that is of a less of a pressing issue, and I don't want to read the entire text here, but this is just to give you an overview. The first paragraph is there, and then you can see that the reviewer here has gone through the sections. Each section there are like number of issues that the reviewer thinks that the author needs to address. Once you're done with your major concerns, you can then start with other minor concerns that are basically going to help to the ease of reading the manuscript. These are usually items that will help, for example, to clear up a sentence or to present a figure or table in a better way, sometimes, or even incorrect references or some technical clarifications, as some examples that are listed here. If you decide to go section by section, here are some examples and instructions for you. Now, in the introduction section, it's best to ask yourself, is the research question clearly stated in the introduction? Is a coherent case made for why the research question is important? Are the most relevant pieces of previous work cited? And the reason I think you need to address these things is that the introduction section usually sets the play and creates the kind of a mindset in reader's mind to move on and go through the rest of the paper. Here is an example. The reviewer here is clearly suggesting authors to revise their introduction and take some parts from the rest of the paper and bring it back into introduction. I found the introduction to the paper to be a bit brief. The authors should spend more time reviewing relevant literature so to set up the reader for the study. On a related note, the discussion reads much like an introduction to a manuscript and provides much of the background necessary to set up the reader for the current study. More detail is needed in the introduction. The authors should also consider focusing the discussion more on the current findings and less on the findings of previous research, so on and so forth. So not only providing your critique, but also suggesting some solutions in order to make it better. The methods section requires extra thought. Maybe these questions will help you. Have the methods been described clearly enough to allow others repeating them? Are they the most appropriate way to answer the research question? In case human or animals were involved, is ethical approval reported? In your opinion, is the research ethical? Is informed consent necessary and reported? Is sex and gender properly reported? Here is another example. Limitation of the study's methods. In real-life practice, reviewers using these methods discuss the method of grading before applying it, and generally agree in consensus after much discussion and consultation with experts on definitions of the various domains that all of the reviewers working on the systematic review then use. A weakness in the method used in this study is that it does not reflect this common practice in its method. Instead, the study had the reviewers independently rate the exercises and only then discuss reconcile. The method used in real life would be expected to improve the agreement level across reviewers, as well as reducing the difficulty of the task as compared to the method used in this study, so on and so forth. The results section, you might want to answer these questions. Are results reported for all experiments analysis described in the methods? Are any results reported for which methods have not been described? Are they presented clearly and consistently? Do the figures in text match up? Here is an example of the review report addressing such things. Older patients more likely than siblings to repeat grade. This is basically a quote of the manuscript. And then the reviewer says, I question whether the overall comparison of 33% for patients is the appropriate comparison to sibling group. In order to address treatment effects, I would think the appropriate sibling comparison would be to grades repeated post-therapy only. Additionally, when reporting differences by age, need to know more about age of siblings, so on and so forth. The discussion section, maybe you want to ask these questions. Does the interpretation reasonably reflect the results, or have the authors gone beyond the data? Are the potential limitations presented? If not, point them out. In majority of manuscripts I encounter as a reviewer, authors ignore to list the limitations. Do the results conflict with those of other researchers, and have potential explanations been proposed? Has the research question been answered? Have the authors summed up what the findings mean in the grand scheme of things? Here is an example. Does your data support your conclusion that the transected end of the pancreas should be closed with interrupted sutures and reinforced with omentum when there was a significant leak rate and there was not comparison data with other techniques? We've got another review that addresses discussion here as well. The first paragraph of your discussion should be revised. It does not make sense to state another finding revealed by the present study is the lower incidence of rescue drugs needed by the use of topical ketoprofen gel, but with statistical insignificance. If the finding did not meet your threshold for statistical significance, you cannot state that you found a difference in need for rescue drug. I would focus on the results of your primary outcome in this paragraph, and perhaps conclude the paragraph by stating that your study supports the use of ketoprofen gel as an effective adjunctive non-opioid and analgesic intervention for ED patients with mechanical low back pain. The title and abstract are important for two reasons. One, it will help readers who are browsing through articles to get their attention. And nowadays, with machine learning tools, it also helps visibility and searchability of the manuscript itself. Although not every author is aware of the fact that the title and abstract makes the discoverability of their paper. It is, as a reviewer, important for you to point it out by helping authors to improve their title and abstract. So ask yourself, does the title accurately reflect the research question and study type? Does the abstract contain the aim of the study and the most important methodological detail? Are the findings reported in the abstract a faithful representation of those reported in the main text? Is anything presented in the summary that isn't described in the main paper? Is the conclusion justified by the data presented? And are the implications for future work stated? I've got another example of review reports here for you, and I leave it to you to read it. Okay, another example is the abstract states the I can't even pronounce this word, was the only significant independent predictor of RV. In the terminology of regression, it is a predictor, but in ordinary language, it is not a predictor. Rather, it is a consequence of RV. I wonder if correlate might be clearer than predictor. So just to summarize, first and foremost, I think these examples all had one thing in common. They were mostly professional and courteous. Try to read the whole paper and refer to guidelines before starting your recommendation, and then structure your report by summarizing the strengths and weaknesses and overall contribution, then listing your major concerns, and then working it out through minor comments. And make sure that you're submitting your reports timely. Now, you're also asked to choose from a decision term, accept, reject, minor, or major. If you choose accept, which is rarely the case, make sure you provide an argument and try to also mention something that still can be improved, if any. If you choose reject, make sure, again, you have a good argument. And it can be that you have, even through a skim read, found a major flaw. Please make sure that you're pointing it out, at least in the confidential comment to editor. If you choose minor revision, it means that you're not really looking forward to read the manuscript again when it is revised, but make sure that you're also mentioning it in your confidential comment to the editor. Make sure that you have a good argument for the decision that you're recommending. And also, you might want to list all your concerns and the requirements you have from the authors, from mandatory to non-mandatory. And then in your confidential comment to editor, make it quite clear that these are the items I think authors need to respond. And these are the items that I would like them, but it's not necessary to respond. Same holds for major. The only difference would be that when you choose a major revision, you are also telling the editor that you want to see the revised version of the manuscript. And in that case, you also need to, again, provide a good argument for your decision, term choice, and list all your concerns and the requirements from authors, from mandatory to non-mandatory. And then in the confidential comment to editor, you can list the ones that you don't think are absolutely necessary to be addressed by the authors. But at any rate, the decision is editors. So even if you find out that the editor has not made the decision that you recommended, you need to consider the fact that you were one out of several reviewers who read the manuscript and provided input. In most cases, the editor basically tries to read the manuscript himself, and then weigh the review reports that are received and try to find a middle ground. Usually reviewers get notified about the decision because most journals also send a copy of the decision letter to author to the reviewers of the manuscript. And with that, I would like to invite you all to consider joining EASE Peer Review Committee. Here is the link. If you go to the EASE website, you'll find out more information about the Peer Review Committee, and you're all welcome to help us giving it more shape and momentum. There is also another thing I would like to mention and thank some of you who helped, and that is the Peer Review Week. It happens every year on the 3rd week of September. And it is about celebrating the important process of research evaluation in all kinds of forms. Each year there is a theme. Around the theme there are loads of activities. So if you are planning for anything, please keep us informed. And with that, I would like to just give you a little bit of time to reach out and ask your questions. Thank you so much. So Duncan, how are we going to address these questions? I just opened the chat. What do you suggest?
Wait, I'm muting myself. Sorry. We had a question at the near the start or earlier from Isabel that said about internal reviews are not considered as peer review, but what kind of practices can you use to really engage new reviewers, find new reviewers, and get people to agree? That's a real sticking point for a lot of developing journals, particularly, but all journals really.
I think one good start would be to look into the list of your recently accepted authors. I believe everyone who has written a manuscript and got it through the peer review and got it accepted and published is a potential reviewer. So if you check your author list and find like the list of people who recently got accepted, I think you can easily reach out to them and ask reviewing manuscripts that are matching their areas of expertise. That's one. Another one is just open the call to the community on your journal homepage in any event that you're reaching out to the community, and invite them to join your journal peer review. You can ask them to provide you with more information about their authorship, like through ORCID, PubMed, Web of Science, Scopus ID. You then have a good understanding of what kind of an author these people are. You can also ask them to provide you with their list of areas of expertise. And then with that, you can have a good understanding of what these people who are interested in becoming a reviewer of your journal are, and then try to match incoming manuscripts with the expertise of these volunteers, if you wish, and invite them. We did an experiment with volunteers, and we found really fantastic results, not only about the engagement, but also about the quality of the work that these people submit. So there is also a lot of potential out there.
I think on the topic of quality, Lubo has just asked a question about using a template for reviewers and structuring a reviewer response more. Do you find a table with guiding questions based on what the editor needs to see in the review report? Does it make the process easier or add additional burden and complication for the reviewers?
That's a great question. We did have a similar idea. We see in all kind of surveys that researchers are always asking for more guidelines when it comes to peer review. And I think structuring the peer review is a good step ahead. I am going to experiment with that in Elsevier. And the idea is to basically move away from that essay way of writing things and provide specific questions to reviewers that you want them to answer. And as an editor, you have a good idea about what do you want from reviewers to focus for. If you can list them as questions with open-ended questions, then I think everyone would appreciate that. Reviewers would appreciate it because they know exactly what the journal editor wants from them. Authors would appreciate that because they know exactly what kind of things they need to do. And I think as an editor, you would like to see those kind of answers instead of reading, a long text and then find out what are the important things that you want to extract from the text. There are some templates out there. Review Quality Instrument, which was developed in the 90s, is a good one. Together with a couple of academics, including Anna, who is an EASE member, and some of her students, I did run a pilot experiment on quality of peer review, and we do also have a review quality instrument. It is published in January this year, and I can circulate that article, which has an appendix with the list of questions that might be helpful for every journal editor to put it on.
Okay, brilliant. Jadranka, did you want to ask your question? Pose it.
Yes, Bahar. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi. First of all, thank you for this excellent presentation. It was very, very useful. And my question is actually related to the concept of editorial peer review, which is not clear to me at all. So I'm asking you because it's quite popular in Croatia, and a lot of Croatian journals declare this editorial peer review. So I don't believe in editorial peer review. And I think that distinction should be made between selection, initial selection, and triage, however you call it. And that actually, when we are speaking about peer review, independent peer reviewers must be included. So what is your opinion on that?
Well, thanks, Jadranka. I cannot agree more with you. I think the role of an editor is to find the right type of manuscript for the right type of reviewers. So yes, you're right. The internal editorial staff, editorial office, editors, whoever we want to call them, are given the role of the triage part. So they basically skim through, and well, if a manuscript doesn't even match the criteria of the journal, or the quality is not good enough to be sent to review reports, they desk reject it. But the ones that pass the desk rejection, I think a peer review report means that then reviewers start proactively reaching out to experts in the field who have the least conflict of interests with the authors, and ask them to review the paper. That would be the right type of peer review process.
Thank you, Bahar.
Sure.
Am I unmuted? Yes, Elaine, did you want to ask your question to Bahar? Maybe not. It's quite short though. Okay.
Oh, she says she cannot speak.
She cannot speak. So if you could ask the question for her.
Okay. Yep. So Elaine's question was about elaborating on discoverability. What's key? What do you mean, and what is the important?
Okay. So I assume for your own research, you usually open something from archive to Google Scholar, whatever you use, and you know, browse through all kind of articles that are written in the keywords that you're looking for. Now, how do you find the manuscript or the article that you want to read? It usually is because it has a catchy title that is really addressing the question that you have in mind. And even then, you read that kind of bit of the text in the manuscript abstract or the article abstract to see whether this is exactly the type of article or manuscript that you want to download and read. Hence, the importance of choosing the good title and a good manuscript abstract or article abstract, so that you easily communicate with your reader. This is the one that you need to read among all the thousands of other articles. I think that was the point I tried to make. And the discoverability, if you're using search engines, is even more important because the search engines are already, you know, ranking those articles for you when you're reading. So the more you use the right type of keywords, I hear a lot from authors that they don't like submission systems asking them to provide keywords upon submitting, but those keywords are very important for the discoverability of your paper if it is published. So this was the kind of these were the items I wanted to mention. And as a reviewer, you can always comment. You know, I always try to see the keywords that authors have put on their manuscript. And sometimes I suggest totally different keywords or I add to them just because I know those will become important. The same goes for the title and the abstract.
Okay, great. We don't have any more. Oh, yes, we do. Eva has just asked, do you think using Publons or reviewer credits platforms would be a good incentive for reviewers to accept the reviews?
Anything that would give researchers more visibility and credit to acknowledge their work that is happening on a voluntary basis is great. I don't have any preferences for any of these things. I would say, as a journal editor, you can do this even nicer by sending, you know, thank you messages to your reviewers, providing them feedbacks. We know exactly from surveys and feedback programs that reviewers want to know what the editor thought about their review reports, what the other reviewers wrote about the manuscript. So keeping reviewers in the decision-making and feedback loop is a great way of acknowledgement. And also, maybe you want to annually thank your best and top reviewers by writing an editorial and naming them. These are also small steps that can go a long way.
Bahar, can I just add a few things?
Sure.
So you might just want to touch on the EASE journal and the fact that we're kind of calling for people who might be interested in peer reviewing for the EASE journal to come forward, and also for anyone who's interested in becoming a peer reviewer, you know, who are at the beginning of their career as a peer reviewer, if they would like to be mentored by someone who's an EASE member who's already an experienced peer reviewer.
Absolutely, you nailed it already, Mary. I don't know what else I can add. But yes, EASE has a journal, scientific journal, and it is always great to have new, fresh blood in the peer review pool. If you are interested in, please reach out to the editor of the EASE journal, ESE. And if you're interested in getting more involved in the peer review process through any kind of mentorship with the experienced members of the EASE community, then please make sure that you reach out to EASE members.
So I think we have joining us today Razul, who just joined as an EASE member this morning. He is based in London at Imperial College, and I maybe allow him to speak. But he is one such he is one such early entrant who is looking for a mentor. So there will be a good example. Can I promote? Let me promote you so we can see you as well, Razul. That would be really good. There we go. Can you see?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Uzbe. I'm very happy to join to your talk. It was really, really nice. And I thanked everyone, especially Bahar. So I hope I can join more to your discussion. And I needed one mentor. I'm just going to finish my PhD and I had a chance to submit papers. And right now I'm in the process of writing, had some experience. So this is very nice to get some new insight about the internal process and the machinery behind the scene when you especially submit something. And that's it. Thank you, Mary.
Good. It's nice to meet you. So glad
Me
to
too,
have you
me
on
too.
board.
Me too.
Thank you. Okay, Bahar. So we will wrap up. Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks also for the kind words in the chat. I am very grateful for all of you who dedicated your time and joined the call today. And we will reach out to you, particularly the chapter representatives, because I think it would be great if we can have these slides also translated to other languages as well. And with that, thank you and goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining.